So I'm delighted to have an Independent Podcast Awards winner, at least that makes one of us, Vicki, from Bring Your Product Idea to Life. It's great to have you back on Podcraft. How are you doing?
Really well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. I'm well. It's a nice sunny spring here in Scotland, so I'm hoping that keeps up. Getting the vitamin D, not seen the sun for a good few years, so how's things been down your way?
Yeah, all sunny here in Kent as well. Yeah, all good.
Good. So, you very kindly stepped into Colin's shoes. He's off in Japan just now, so I'm looking to speak to some other cool podcasters. And this is a timely conversation for us, isn't it? Because I believe you've just kind of hit that 5-year mark with your podcast.
Yeah, it was about 2-3 weeks ago. Hit 5 years, which feels really big, but also kind of not, because it's just become something that I do now. But I think it is important to mark these milestones because I think you can take it for granted, and I'm told that not all podcasts make it that long, so I think it is something to be proud of.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of podcasts don't make it to 5 episodes, let alone 5 years. So, to be going that long is great. And there's obviously a lot that I think the listener could learn from your experiences here. So going back, I mean, 5 years ago, I don't know if you're the same as me, but I think 10 years ago is 1995. And then 5 years ago, I think is 2012. So I don't know if it's when we got into the 20s. I just my capacity for keeping track of years just degenerated. But so that puts us kind of just before the pandemic then that you got launched. Is that about right?
It was actually the first week of, it was a really bad timing because I was planning to launch a podcast and I'd already pre-recorded some episodes and then I scheduled them to go live. And I think it was the week that we went into the lockdown in the UK that my first episodes were published, which was fine. But it then did mean that I was trying to then record a weekly podcast at home with 2 small children, which I hadn't been counting on.
Yeah. Aye, so I mean, in those early days, that, again, this is a period where almost the whole world launched a podcast in that time. It was just such unique circumstances. So, I mean, what was your thought process going into this? I'm going to create this podcast. What were your kind of plans or ambitions?
Well, when I started my own products business, which was a few years before that, I got into podcasts around that time. And so I was listening to lots of business podcasts and marketing podcasts. But I found all the ones I listened to, and maybe this was or wasn't the case, but I just couldn't find anything where the person that was talking to me wasn't that much further ahead than I was. So I'd listen to all these interviews of millionaires or people talking about, I made 6 figures on Amazon in 6 months or whatever it was. And that just felt so unachievable. And so what I wanted was to have a podcast for people running product businesses that were actually still in it, some of them still in the really early days, because I felt like the advice and the mistakes that they'd made and the things they had to share would be so much more relevant to other people starting out than people who were maybe 5-10 years down. And actually, from my own experience, because I started my products business probably about 10 years, I don't have it now, but I was selling products 10 years ago, I've actually forgotten some of the stuff of what it was like at the beginning, because time passes and the things that were a big challenge back then suddenly aren't. So that was kind of the idea, to speak to people who were actually in it, so that the information they gave to my listeners who were intended to be product business owners or people who wanted to sell products was as relevant to them as possible. And also I wanted it to be inspirational, but without being scary. So, because not all of us want to be millionaires, or not all of us, that's not what we're all aiming for. Maybe some people are just looking to sell products do something alongside their day job or while they're at home. But everything I was listening to was just you should be aiming to make 6 figures. And I just didn't think that was relatable to everyone. So I was kind of trying to go in the complete opposite direction from that.
Yeah, that's something you hear a lot in podcasting. With podcasters, we talk about your avatar or your target audience, but just thinking about almost speaking to yourself, but 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever, that's who you're addressing. And then obviously, as a byproduct of that, a lot of your listeners are just literally in that stage of their journey, and that's why the content relates to them so much. In terms of the logistics of podcasting, then what were the challenges? You know, you had the information in your head, but to get equipment to record it, to edit it, to upload it, like, can you remember much about that period?
I think I brought a microphone from Amazon, and I think I did a bit of Googling and watched a few YouTube videos, and then went, that one looks good, I'll buy that. And I plugged it in. And the same with headphones. I've got some headphones, plugged them in. I taught myself through YouTube again how to use some software on my Mac for editing. I think I recorded on Zoom first of all. I don't do that anymore, but I think that's what I was doing originally. I say I think because you know how it is, things change so much as you like evolve. I actually found though that side of it not too tricky, and that's not to downplay it, because I think starting a podcast is a big thing, and I know lots of people think about it and then maybe they procrastinate or they worry about it. I think though I'm the sort of person who likes to just get on and do something, and I just think, well, I'll give it a go, and then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, or I can make it better. And I did have to make it better, because I would say, for example, if you listen to my earlier podcast, the audio probably isn't great, because I didn't know much about sound reduction, and I was doing my own editing. I don't do my own editing anymore. But I feel like you've got to start somewhere. Actually, the hardest thing I found, logistics-wise at the beginning, was getting guests, because it was a brand new podcast that relied on me having people to talk to. I didn't know that many people. The podcast was brand new. That was the biggest challenge actually for me, was finding people who wanted to come on and talk to me.
How did you go about finding those guests? And can you talk to us a wee bit about like some of the approaches that didn't work versus, you know, some of the guests that did come on, and what you think might have worked out there? I
used to is sort of basic as it sounds. I just used to ask if I saw someone and I thought they'd be a good guest. I just used to ask them. Early on, I was asking quite a few people that I knew. I was in a few networks, so networks women in business, and so I'd put shout outs in there, and then I'd get some people coming on. I think what's really helped with getting guests now is the fact that the show's been going, so people have got an idea what it is. So now I very rarely reach out to people to come on. I get a lot of inbound people, so I get people listening to the podcast, because I do mention on the podcast from now and again, if you think you'd be a good guest, let me know. So I get a lot of people coming to me. I also get a lot of people referring their friends or someone they've met. Because I think now people have a really good idea what it is. They can listen to some episodes and get an idea. For me, that was another thing I struggled with at the beginning, is that a lot of people had never been a guest on a podcast and they were really nervous about it. But now I think they can listen to my podcast and get a sense of me and understand that I'm not scary and I'm not going to ask nasty questions. But at the beginning, they only had my word. They only had my word for that. And even now I still get some people who say, oh no, I don't want to come on because I don't want to talk about myself. Don't want to be recorded, which I totally get. But yeah, I don't know how much advice I have, because I'll be honest, I was just very, not persistent isn't the right word. I'd only ask someone once, but I definitely would sort of send emails and say, would you like to come on my podcast? And then I just had a big list of people and I would just ask them, do you want to come on my podcast? I think actually something that would, in terms of advice, is that I found that at the beginning, working with people I knew who knew me really worked. So I had a few clients for my business, then my consulting business, so I would ask them because obviously they knew me. I would ask friends. If I knew someone and I realised we might have a friend in common, I might ask that friend for an introduction. So I guess contacting people warm was easier. Now it's easier for me to contact people cold than it was, because I've got an established podcast. But at the beginning, I think maybe approaching people that you know, or who aren't just like completely cold to you, is really helpful.
Yeah, you mentioned that like you are still doing some outreach even though you've got a lot of inbound now. So like now and then you will want to still reach out to somebody to invite them on. Yeah,
and it's mainly either a client that I've worked with, so completely warm outreach. Sometimes I work with someone and I think, I'd love to put you on my podcast because your product's really interesting, or there's something about your story that's really interesting and I think my audience would like it. Or occasionally I come across a business and I just think, I'd love to know how they invented that. And then I just ask them, and it comes from a place of I'm like genuinely like, I'd love to know their story. Or occasionally I hear someone on someone else's podcast and think, I really like them on mine. I don't do it as much now because, to be honest, my schedule's, which is a really nice place to be, is really, really booked up with guests, which is like brilliant. I really like that. However, if anyone's listening to this and does want to be a guest, don't be put off, because I love having a full schedule of guests. I think it's really exciting, and it means that I'm getting great guests as well.
Do you have a system in place? You know, you're saying that you'll get friends maybe telling you, recommending certain guests, or you'll get listeners getting in touch. Does that just all come into your inbox, or is there like a form you've got or a system or anything?
At the moment, it all comes into my inbox, and I feel like I probably do need to get some sort of form, mainly because any recommendations I get or anyone who reached out to me directly so far, touch wood, they've all been great. They've all been great fits. What I am starting to get is a lot of booking agents getting in touch. And often the people they're pitching are just so irrelevant to my podcast. You know, people selling crypto, for example, which is nothing to do with selling physical products.
Yeah. Classic.
So I feel like having some sort of system to filter out those people maybe I need a form just for them, because I feel like when someone's taken the time to like approach you and say, can I be on your podcast? I do feel like everyone who's approached me anyway, I think, yeah, you'd be a great guest, because clearly they've listened to a couple of episodes, they've got an idea what it is, or someone's told them about it. Most of the time they're listening already. So they've got a really good sense of, you know, this would be good for them. And actually, my only criteria really is that you sell your own products. That's kind of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. With have you noticed a difference in, like, for lack of a better term, the education that you do with a guest when you're reaching out to them, in terms of, like, 5 years ago, did you find yourself going back and forward and them saying, you know, well, what is the podcast? How does it work? Like, how does it get recorded? Versus now, where I imagine there's a lot less of those questions. How does that kind of line up with your own experiences?
There was definitely a bit more of that. So I definitely had to do a lot more explanation of, this is how we'll be recording and this is what you'll need to do. So, for example, when I was recording on Zoom, I did have to explain to some guests that they'd have to download Zoom before we spoke, because unbelievably, not everyone had Zoom. And now we think everyone has it. And now I use a different software. Now I use StreamYard. And again, that you don't have to download anything to use that. But I find now people know what podcast is. They've got an understanding that it's going to be recorded. I do make it really clear I record video, because that's something I realised early on. People weren't always aware that the video was being recorded. And I know we'll talk about this later, but I didn't used to use the video. But obviously, if you're on a Zoom and you're sharing and you're looking at each other, that is being recorded. And I did realise that people who weren't used to maybe doing calls online weren't actually aware that that was a thing. So I had to let people know about that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think there definitely was a bit more. But in some ways, though, it's kind of gone a bit the other way, in that because people are now so aware of what podcast is, they know they're not live. I do sometimes feel like in the middle of a podcast, someone will stop and say, oh, actually, can I just go and answer the door? Because they know that I can edit it.
Yeah. It'll bring its own challenges too. A lot of assumptions that folks are kind of bringing to the mic. Let's get into the video stuff now then, because I mean, you've alluded to this already. So I believe you said before when we were chatting that, you know, you were doing the video anyway, you were seeing each other anyway, and you felt that you maybe might as well just record that and upload it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was recording video before, but I was never sharing the video anywhere, because I hadn't told people I was doing that. So I don't think it was fair to share videos of people without them knowing. The podcast was always audio. But then from the beginning of, I want to say it was the beginning of 2024, I was like, actually, I'm recording the video. We might as well put this on YouTube. And I guess in a way it was following a trend, because lots of podcasts I listened to were going onto YouTube. And I thought, well, why not? No idea if anyone would watch them or not. So then I made the change in that I first of all started telling people I was using the video, because I think it's important that people know if they're being recorded that I'm actually going to put it somewhere. So that's actually something that's really clear if someone books with me. And then, I set up the YouTube channel and started putting out full episodes as video. And then I have a team who helps me with sort of the post-production, and they also put out some shorts for each episode as well that we also share on social media. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I'll get into the team shortly. Staying on the video itself, I suppose, for now, I've got a few questions about that. I mean, you talked about letting folks know that you were going to record the video. Do you ever get any pushback from anyone, or, you know, does somebody have to rush off and change their background, or like how does that kind of go for you?
I haven't had any pushback as yet. Sometimes I think people do. I can see people have got a background on because maybe where they're recording they want that, and that's of course absolutely fine. But no, I haven't had any pushback. I will be honest though and say that there have been some instances where I haven't published a video because there've maybe been so many interruptions, as I was alluding to earlier, and I don't have the capability, and I'm not prepared at the moment to sort of to edit the videos to the full podcast video, because my podcast is very, like we're chatting now, it's very natural. If someone coughs or sneezes, it doesn't matter. That stays in. I think it's fine. But I'm not yet editing the videos to a point where if someone went to answer the door and then came back, that I would be in a position to sort of cut that together. So there are episodes where I'm like, actually, I can't use your video because of this.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I've heard that a lot from folks, this difference between edit and audio. Like, you could make really flawless audio edits, but video, it's a whole different kettle of fish. The slightest, I know you get the cut edits and that, but I've pieced together a sentence from like 6 different sentences. If that was a video, it would just look nuts. So it's just it's another wee angle that I suppose you've got to kind of consider. I take it you've never had experiences where maybe you felt that the guest has, again, for lack of a better term, like stiffened up a bit because they're on video. Do you think folks are just so used to video these days that doesn't really happen?
Yeah, I've never really had that happen. And I think, as you say, lots of us now are used to doing calls on. I mean, that's probably one of the things that's made it easier to do this post 2020 is that a lot of us then got really used to just being on calls like this and just chatting to someone on a screen. I definitely have guests who are a bit nervous, but I think it's more of it's a podcast, especially if it's their first podcast. I don't think they're any more nervous about the video aspects. And I'll be honest, I think we do forget it because I don't really like being recorded. Sounds silly for someone whose face is all over YouTube, but I don't really, if I thought about it, I probably wouldn't do it. So I just have to not think about it too much and just think about the fact that it's really useful content and no one's there to look at my face.
Let's talk about the impact of video then. Like when you started to publish it on YouTube and presumably elsewhere, what was your kind of approach? Were you putting the full episode up? Were you chopping it up into little segments, or how did that work?
So I started off putting just the full episodes on, and actually I should also say on YouTube you can pull through your full episodes as audio as well. So they play on YouTube, they're audio, so that I use that in the instance where someone, if there isn't a full video to use for the episode, I've got that, so that's really nice. So I started off with just those full episodes. What we do now is YouTube Shorts as well, so shorter clips, and they're also great sizes to be used with Instagram Reels. So that's something else that we're doing. I'll be really honest, my YouTube is going slowly, possibly because I'm not great at publicising the fact that I'm on YouTube. I think I need to be talking about it a little bit more, because while the audio side, the audio side of the podcast seems to have grown quicker than the YouTube side, and I don't know whether that's just because it's YouTube or because there's something I'm not doing or not talking about enough. But yeah, I'm definitely seeing that.
Are you seeing pretty consistent stats in YouTube, like plays per episode, or do you find that they could vary quite drastically?
They really vary, which leads me to think that, and I can actually see from my YouTube analytics that I'm mostly found via search. So people are searching for certain topics and one of my videos comes up. So I think that's why it varies so much. So I might record an episode that, is maybe really resonates with something people are looking for information on, and then of course they'll watch that video. But it might be that others, while they're great episodes, because I can see that I do have some subscribers on YouTube, but as I say, most of my views come from search. So if the topic that we're speaking about isn't something people are actively looking for, I imagine we will get less views for that reason.
What sort of things are you using the shorts, like the YouTube shorts? Because it's what's the term again? I'm so out of touch. The portrait term, like the phone. When the phone is upright. God, I sound like somebody's gran here who's got a phone for the first time. So on the shorts, like that wouldn't be full episodes or that. So is that just a clip of the episode, or is that you doing a clip, maybe talking about an episode that you've just put out?
So they're clips. So at the end of each episode, I ask my guests for their number one piece of advice. And so they're really good to clip up. And then I have a playlist of those on YouTube, and they're great for promoting the episodes. Then there also might be something that the guest talks about. You'll have this when you're talking to someone and they say something, you're like, oh, that's really good. I tend to make a note of that and clip those up into shorts. And also because I have some solo episodes now. So at the end of last year, I started doing a second weekly episode, which is just me. And that's a much shorter one, sort of 15, 20 minutes. And I record that to video as well. So that goes up as a full video episode. But also when I'm preparing that, because I bullet them all out, I kind of already have in mind, okay, I can clip these bits up. And actually I find those shorts, the shorts that I've kind of prepared in advance, the ones that are just me, those ones tend to do quite well. And I think it's because I already know what I'm going to say and I've kind of prepared them to be shorts. Whereas the other ones, it's kind of led by the conversation and which bits can we pull out, if that makes sense.
When picking out these kind of short clips, then is that something that you're making a note of during the episode or just listening back after it, rather than maybe using an AI tool that might claim to like pick out a compelling clip?
Sometimes I will make a note of something as we're talking. I just jot down a time code, but sometimes it is afterwards. I tend to, when you upload the episodes and then you get the chapters. I don't know if you know what I mean when your podcast episode pulls into chapters, and that's really good for me to get a reminder of. Oh yeah, we spoke about that. So sometimes I'll look at that as well. That's something that's done automatically, I believe.
Yeah. What is it? What software are you recording with?
StreamYard.
Right. You like StreamYard? You tried like Riverside, Descript, anything? Or not Descript, sorry, Squadcast.
I haven't tried Squadcast. I've got a Riverside free plan, and I've got some solo episodes to record this week, and I actually plan to record those using Riverside just so I can compare. Because lots of people talk about Riverside. I haven't used it, so I feel like I wouldn't mind giving it a go. As I said, I was using Zoom, and I moved away from that because I just felt Zoom's great for video conferencing, but I think not really for podcasting.
Too busy or baffled by tech to start your podcast? Well, Alitu makes it easy. Record solo or calls, edit by deleting text, or with our drag and drop tools. Alitu even removes ums, as, and filler words automatically. And with built-in hosting, you can publish direct to Apple, Spotify, and many more apps with just one click. Try Alitu free at alitu.com. That's ALITU.com.
And again, stupid question probably from my point of view, but the formatting of a short video, like I say, it's a different ratio than what we're recording in now. So when you want to upload a short, will your software just create that automatically so you could upload it to shorts and it wouldn't look wonky?
Yeah, well, StreamYard and Riverside both have features where they kind of take your video and condense it into a short. I don't know how they do it, but they sort of do it so that you're still in the centre and it's just vertical. StreamYard's isn't as good because there's space at the top and bottom, if you see what I mean. So you can see that it was recorded in landscape and then they've got it in there. Riverside, I've noticed, is the full screen. And yeah, both of those, and that's how I create the shorts. I create them in either of those. There's probably other ways to do it, but I figure if I'm paying for a bit of software, then I might as well try and use the features that I can. And I quite like it. It's got a text function where you can select the text, that you want included in this short, and then it will know to select that bit of the video, which I think is quite smart. Yeah.
Your YouTube channel then, is it? I know you've got the shorts, but if we put them to the side and look at the main videos, are they all podcast episodes, or do you have the odd other video that you're doing?
They're all podcast episodes. Actually, I think I've done one or two other videos, which has been, I've talked about something in my podcast, so this might be quite boring, but there was a specific tool I was talking about in one of my podcast episodes, so then I decided to record a video showing how to use it, because I was like, actually, I've given people this tool, but it might not be self-explanatory when they go there, so that was kind of like a supplementary piece of content, but it is mostly podcast episodes and shorts that I'm putting up there.
Mm-hmm. So you've said that your growth has been sort of slow and steady on YouTube, but presumably it's enough to encourage you to keep doing it than just, go back to audio.
Yeah, because while it's slow, it does go up. So you can look at your analytics on YouTube, and I look in every week, and every week the arrow's pointing upwards for subscribers, for watches, and I've forgotten what the other one is. But all of the arrows are pointing in the right direction. And while I think the number of subscribers is growing slowly, the number of views, interestingly, is growing faster. Which obviously means that there are lots of people that are watching and not subscribing, and so that's probably the next thing for me to figure out. But at the moment, it's all looking positive. And actually, because I record the video anyway, I do feel like there might be a world in, there could possibly be a time, I'm not promising I'm going to do all of this forever, there might be a time where I go, do you know what, the shorts just aren't worth it because they're not getting the views or whatever it is. But because I'm recording the video the podcast as a video, it's there. I kind of feel like it doesn't take that much more work to get that on YouTube, really.
Yeah, and like you've said before, like if there's the odd video that you don't feel is really usable, you're still putting the audio out there. So, it's not like you're really losing out on anything, is it?
No, and I just feel like I want to use all this content that I've got. I think the question mark is, will I always continue creating extra content? Because things like creating the shorts, they do take extra time. And I think that at some point I will have to look and say, am I getting enough views on those that it makes it worth spending that time? Because that's what it's all about, isn't it, really? Because we could all do so much with our podcasts. You have one episode and you could turn it into a blog, you could turn it into videos, you can clip it up, you can do all sorts of things, but you just have to think, okay, what's actually the best use of my time here?
Yeah, they often say, like, just because you could doesn't mean you should, or something along those lines. What other platforms then are you utilising this video? Like, are you putting it up on any social platforms?
So the short form videos we use on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. Not really Facebook, because I find that, I don't know if anyone else finds this, but I find that Facebook now don't really get much engagement, and I don't really do a lot. I've got a podcast page. I don't do much on there now because it seems to be the lowest engagement, and you can't be everywhere. I know lots of other podcasters are getting onto TikTok, and I think the short content probably works well there. That's not something I've looked at yet, mainly because I don't want to spread myself too thin. And yeah, it comes back to not being able to do everything, I think.
So are you seeing decent results on, was it LinkedIn and Instagram that you said you were mainly focused on?
Yeah, I think I get conversation from them, which is something. It's hard to tell whether people will watch a video and then go and off and fight and watch and listen to the full episode, which is kind of what you want to do, because the videos are essentially trailers, aren't they, for the episode? So whether it directly leads to podcast downloads, I don't know, but it does lead to some engagement. So that's great. And also for the guests, the other thing is, if someone comes as a guest on my podcast, I really want to talk about them everywhere that I can. And the clips are always their, when I say their best bits, I'm not trying to say the rest of the episode is, but you know what I mean? It's sort of their highlights. It's them showing, it's their like highlight reel. And I really want that shown as much places as possible, because for every guest that comes on and shares their time with me, I want as many people as possible to go and listen to that episode. And even if they don't listen to the episode, to see a short clip of that person, I think that's also great, because remember, these are all product business owners. So if someone hears a short clip and then they go over and see, I wonder what this person sells, or let's go and find out more about their product, that's a win for me as well. So even if it doesn't affect my podcast downloads, if it gets more traffic over to the guest and to their website or wherever they're selling, I'm really happy about that as well.
Before we got on that decision to build your team and how that's kind of worked out for you, I just wanted to ask, the AI hype in podcasting the last 3 years has been massive. Like, have you used much, if or any, AI tools at all for your process? So
I have tried the AI, to create clips in the videos. I wasn't very impressed, if I'm honest. That's built into both StreamYard and Riverside. I haven't tried the Riverside one. I tried the StreamYard one, for them to pull out clips, but for me they didn't choose anything better than what I would do myself, so that didn't really work. I do use, I guess it is AI, to do my translation, because I have a transcript for every episode, and that's AI. That's actually really, really good. So I use that through my podcast host. I used to use something called Descript, but I found that wasn't quite as accurate. What I'm using now seems much more accurate, so I do that. And then I sometimes use AI if I need a bit of help with the show notes. There's something you can use to generate show notes. To be honest, it always needs an edit. I never just go with what AI suggests because I don't think it talks that much like a human. But sometimes you just need a starting point, and it does actually save a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm. Is that like for text-based stuff then? Is that like ChatGPT or is it a different tool?
So I host am I allowed to talk about where I host my podcast?
Yeah, of course.
About that. So I host my podcast with Captivate, and they have an AI tool that you can pay for. So it's an add-on, and that's all built into that. And that also generates the chapters for the audio file that I mentioned earlier. You can get it to suggest episode titles, but most of the time I know what I want the title to be. You can get it to suggest the SEO information, YouTube tags. I don't use all of this, but it's all there. But I think it's useful as a starting point.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks find it helpful that way. Like you say, for idea generation, just getting rid of that blank page with a couple of bullet points or getting feedback on what you've maybe written as well is a really handy way to use it. You mentioned Captivate there. You've been on Captivate the whole time. Was that where you started out hosting your podcast?
Yeah, right from the start, because right when I was starting my podcast, the founder of Captivate did a series. I can't remember if it was on YouTube or where he basically did a really short, I think, a course, and they might still be available about how to start a podcast. And I think it was just a few series of YouTube videos, and so that's what I listened to. And so therefore I was like, okay, I really like him. I like what he's talking about. He's made this simple. I'll go over and use his platform. And I've stuck with it because I've been really happy with it. It's been really easy to use, really reliable. There's new tools added all the time, which I really like. There's lots of new features. So compared to 5 years ago, there's a lot more on there, but the price hasn't gone up, apart from I pay extra for the AI tools. But I'm happy to pay for those because they add time, and there's been so much added in between then that we actually haven't been charged for.
Yeah. Aye, they're a great company, Captivate, like definitely one of the best hosts out there, and really good people as well at that company. So you're in good hands for sure. Building a team then, like there must have been a point along the journey where you thought like, I need to hire some help here. Talk to us a bit about that decision.
Yeah, so the first thing I outsourced was my podcast editing because I don't really enjoy it, if I'm honest. I don't mind. I still edit, I should say, my solo episodes because it makes so much sense for me to spend, block out a day, record my episodes, edit my episodes, clip up the short, just do all of that myself. Because I write the episodes, I'm so close to the content, and obviously those episodes are kind of part of my overall content plan. I know what I want to talk about, I know what I want to share, so I do those. But the interviews was just taking me ages to edit and then put on the intro and the outro. And then if someone did want something taken out, or someone had a loud coughing fit or whatever, having to try and remember what bit am I going back, and then I'm cutting it. Although I have to say, the longer I've been podcasting, interestingly, I feel the less editing is needed, and I don't know why that is. But I still don't do it myself anymore. So I went out and looked for an editor, and I did that by speaking to other people who have podcasts and saying, who are you using? And then I spoke to a few until I found someone who could do what I needed, which is quite minimal. I don't need loads of editing. I don't take out every stutter or every misword. The podcast is quite natural. But for me, it was more about the sound. I feel like podcasts have to sound good. Like now everyone has like really good headphones, it's right in their ears, and I feel like if the sound's dodgy, I've definitely stopped listening to podcasts because I feel like the audio quality is not good enough. And so that's something I'm really keen on, but I don't know how to do that myself.
So the person that you found then, that was a kind of word of mouth recommendation?
Yes. So as I say, just from other people with podcasts, I just asked, who are you using? And then I approached a couple, and then I'm actually though saying that using someone different now. I've just remembered from who I used originally, but it was the same process. I did start using someone else, and now I'm using someone different.
Did you find there was quite a lot of work up front with, what you were after, and the setting up the workflow and that? Like, did it seem at the time like this is a lot of work?
Not really. I don't know whether I've just got lucky. I did give a clear brief at the start in terms of what I wanted. And as I said, it is minimal editing. It's take out anything obvious and level the sounds out, put the intro and outro in. The person I used was really good actually because they remixed my intro and outro. I didn't even ask them to do that, but they said they weren't very good and they redid them for me, which I appreciated because they weren't. I did them myself originally. And we just agreed the process, which is that I send episodes in batches because I think that's more efficient. And, you know, I'm paying for this. So I think we spoke about the most efficient way. They agreed that sending batches of files over was better than sort of one a week or whatever. And because of my guests are booked so far in advance, and I'm recording a bit in advance, I can do that. So maybe once a month I send over some files. They then have got a bit of leeway to get the editing done. So there's no rush jobs or anything. And then they get them sent back and it works really nicely.
Good. So that's you set up with like editing and production. Did you hire help for any other aspect of the podcast?
Yeah, so I have a VA and actually she has a team. So I hired a lady as a VA years ago, and she was doing a lot of my admin. Her team has since grown, and she has people on her team who can do video editing, who can do social media, who can do what else can they do? They can do everything. They can do all sorts of stuff. So what started with was me outsourcing to her was, can you get this podcast onto Captivate for me? So just that process. I would get the file and I would say, can you upload this on Captivate, do the show notes, do the artwork, because we have an artwork per episode, schedule the episodes. But now actually they do the creation of the shorts for me. So the YouTube shorts and Instagram reels for the guest episodes. For some of the episodes, we do blogs as well. Not for every episode, because that's a lot of work, as we spoke about earlier. So it's about selecting which episodes would make really good, useful blog posts. What else do they do? They do everything really. Chasing guests if we need artwork or links or anything like that. Sharing the episode with the guests when it's done. So really, the only things that I'm doing is booking the guests and having the conversation, which is the bit I think I'm best at, to be honest. It's been a bit of a process of sort of outsourcing the other stages, but I think it's got to a really good place. And actually, even dealing with the editor, I don't deal with the editor anymore. So my VA will send over the files, get them back, and just it's made the whole thing a lot easier. But I have to say, this is obviously 5 years on. There was a time when I was doing absolutely everything myself, and this has been a process where there's been things where I've gone like, actually, I don't need to be doing this.
How many years in was it that you decided to hire your editor?
The editor was the first thing. I think that might have been after about a year to 18 months, something like that. And then I think it was 2 and a bit years before I got my VA to help with anything podcast related. And that was mainly because that summer, I remember it was coming up to the summer holidays and I had a lot of travel and things booked. And I was just thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get an episode out every week when I'm not always going to be at a computer. And so that was sort of her saying to me, do you know what, I could actually do this for you. You can go away and relax, and as long as you've done the recording and you have the episodes, I can then make sure they get released. And back then we were only doing audio anyway, so that made total sense. And I have to say, one of the best things about outsourcing it is that peace of mind that I know an episode's going to go out every week regardless of where I am or what I'm doing, because I will have recorded that episode probably 6 to 8 weeks ago.
And what, like, if we look at your kind of week to week, you know, how much time would you say you need to dedicate to like conversations with your team, you know, getting any feedback or giving instructions or anything like that?
Now, not so much, because we've got a really good process. So I should say, actually, something I did when I outsourced this is I documented everything, so every single step, which I think is a really good thing to do if you're outsourcing anything, because it means if the person you've outsourced it to suddenly isn't around, you've got a document, you can share that with somebody else. But right now, really, we do obviously check in with each other, but often only if there's a query or something's changed. I'd say that now it works really, really smoothly.
Just a quick question on episode formats. Like you talked about mixing in the odd solo episode. What's the thought process when you want to do something solo versus have a conversation with a guest?
So I used to mix them in. So I used to do some episodes were solo, some were guests. Then I used to do every fourth episode was a solo one. So it'd be 3 with a guest, 4 of them. Now what I do is, partly because I have so many guests sort of on the schedule, you know, I think I've scheduled episodes to the end of August now. Where are we? We're March, April. You know, haven't had all of these interviews, but I've got people booked in. So I've taken myself out of the Friday, and now I do a second weekly episode on a Tuesday, which is just me. So part of that is to take myself out of the schedule so that when I record a guest, there's less time between me speaking with them and their episode going live. But also because I was realising that I have my own business, I have my own consultancy, I have a lot of knowledge to share. But actually, I was not only because I was speaking to other people, and obviously I want to highlight the guest and for them to share their knowledge and their experience. It's all about them. But I thought, actually, it's really good if people actually know a bit more about what I do and how I can help them. And I'm kind of sharing some stuff as well, which is the reason for the second episode. But it's out of that normal Friday schedule. Mainly so I can fit as many guests in as I can.
Yeah, I think we talked about this on a previous episode of Podcraft, about that tension between, like, when you're building authority, like getting great guests on, getting their perspective is excellent, but also, some hosts can be guilty of burying themselves almost because they just become an interviewer, and the listener might not even realise that they have their own skill set, their own experiences. So do you get much feedback on the formats of the episodes, or is it, I know most podcasters, it's very hard to hear from your listeners or get feedback, but
not really. I get feedback, so there'll be certain guests or certain episodes. I'll get people say, I listened to this episode and I really liked it, or I took this from that episode, which is really nice. But no, not really. Although in good news for me, I've noticed that my solo episodes get almost the same, very, very similar downloads to the guests, which is really positive, because so that's kind of feedback it's not direct feedback from listeners, but it kind of is. But that was something I wasn't expecting. I was a bit worried that no one would want to listen to me when I was talking by myself. And there probably are people who only listen to one or the other, by the way. I'm not saying everyone's listening to both, but that's kind of good feedback that I've got, not from listeners, but from the data that says actually both of these episode types are valid. And that's why the data's actually been really useful.
Mm-hmm. It would be interesting, you might have done this, but like in the Apple Podcast Connect portal, you can look at completion rates, drop-off rates and stuff like that. Quite scary to do that, of course, but it's always a decent wee sample size that you get in there, so you could do a bit of digging on to see if there's any variation between the episodes.
That's a good idea. And actually, I don't, even though, as you say, it's scary, I actually really like looking at the data, because I think podcasting is really hard. You get this anecdotal feedback that I was talking about where someone will say, I really like this. But actually, a lot of the time, you don't. So the data is a really good way of telling you what's working and what isn't. I think it's probably the best tool that we've got as podcasters, unless we have got an audience who talks back to us. But I'm imagining that for most podcasters, that isn't the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was on the Spotify portal, one of my own shows, and I just noticed there's like a bunch of comments in there now, because you could do comments on Spotify. So I had no idea. It wasn't massive amounts, but every other episode there was like a wee comment here or there. So it was pretty cool to see something like that. So we've talked about that. That's like 5 years now. What lies ahead for you? Like any future plans or aims or anything like that you're looking to achieve?
Not really, and that's probably, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I want to keep going, because I feel like I love doing the podcast. It's probably one of my favourite things that I do. So the podcast will definitely continue, and I think it will continue as is. So for now, I think it will continue with audio and video, and I think the episode format will stay the same. It's really hard to say, because I don't know whether you've found this with any of your own podcasts, but I feel like they kind of evolve organically in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've been guilty of this before with some of my shows where I'm not thinking that far ahead. And I say guilty, that it's not necessarily a negative thing, but yeah, 4 years later you think, that podcast, it looks a lot different from maybe what I thought it might on episode 3 or whatever. So yeah, it's always a work in progress. I think that's a big beauty of the medium as well. You're not putting out there something that's finished and done. Like, it's constantly evolving, which gives it a lot of strength as well, the strength to be able to adapt to various things. So 5 more years, 10 more years, sometimes it's better just not to think too far into the future, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. I do have one goal, actually, when I thought about it, which is that I have a Facebook group for the podcast, so for podcast listeners. And that is actually, so it's kind of separate from the podcast, but that is something I'd actually like to grow, mainly because that is a way I can get some feedback. And I often get suggestions there for things people would like me to talk about, or guests that could come on, or certain topics. So actually, I would love to grow that side of it a bit more, because the thing is that I started doing this because I wanted it to be useful. And I think it will be more useful if I'm doing episodes that people, are wanting. So I think if I can build that engagement, or whether that's the Facebook group or whether that's some YouTube comments or wherever it is, but actually building engagement would be really good, because I want these episodes to be of use to people. But sometimes it's me just guessing.
Yeah. Well, Vicki, I'd really appreciate your time. I'm sure the listeners taking a lot from that. Congrats on the 5 years as well. Is there anywhere that you would like the listener to check out? Anywhere you want to point us towards?
Well, we can go to my website, vickyweinberg.com, and then that's probably the best place to go, because that's got everything about me, and you can get to the podcast from there as well.